we kick things off with our lead who has suddenly reincarnated into another world. However, this isn't the normal case of an average Joe becoming a superhero. As a matter of fact, he has become a monster. He is now half human and half orc, but this has only made his life more difficult. We can see this in the orc village where our hero is being ridiculed by the orc children, because his mother is apparently a female knight. His father happens to be the village chief, but that only makes the situation worse, because our hero is constantly told that he brings shame upon the orc community. The most ironic joke though is that his name happens to be Orc. The teasing doesn't even stop when his mom shows up, so Orc just gets more worked up. She asks him if he's enjoying with his friends, but that clearly isn't the case, so he starts acting rudely with her. This is not good manners, so his mom asks him to remember how she raised him. However, Orc has had enough of the bullying, even though his mom encourages him to fight back against his bullies. Our hero thinks back to the time he was reincarnated, and while he did enjoy feeding from his mother's bosom at first, it is all a thing of the past now. He is very upset with her for being a human because he wanted to be an actual orc in his new life. However, his rudeness doesn't offend his mother, and she simply smiles at him, which he finds quite scary. That's when she takes out a massive sword and decides to show him what true strength really is. Orc looks on in amazement as his mom slashes down an entire tree with a single swipe of the sword. That's when she explains to him that she may not have the strength of a monster due to her being a female woman, but she has trained and harnessed multiple skills to reach the level she's at today. Then, she tells Orc that the only reason he's weak right now is because he doesn't want to become strong. However, instead of gloating over her abilities, she smiles once again and encourages Orc to train with her. Despite this, our hero still acts a little grumpy and says that he doesn't need to get stronger anyway. It's at this time when he remembers what his father told him. Basically, Orc may not be at the same level as a monster, but he's considerably stronger than a human, which gives him an advantage. Suddenly, his mom tells him that he's wasting his powers and needs to train with her. Orc still acts shy, so she tells him that he won't be able to impregnate cute girls if he remains weak. Of course, this comes as a huge shock to our hero, and he is surprised by her enthusiasm. It is believed that she is the strongest female knight amongst the humans, but she is currently interested in turning her son into a playboy, just like his dad. Now, it's time for us to view a flashback, and it's around the time Orc's parents first met. It so happened to be on the battlefield where his dad was at war with the humans as a demon lord. Eventually, the lovers met and fought each other, but despite all her strategies and tactics, Orc's mom still ended up losing to his dad. However, instead of finishing her off, the demon lord fell in love with her, and that's how they ended up together. Back to the present, she starts talking about how badly she wanted the demon lord's seed inside her, but this is obviously something that Orc doesn't want to hear. It's a rather hilarious situation as Orc's mom maintains a smile on her face, but also tells him to become strong. Otherwise, he will only get ugly women. It doesn't matter to our hero, because he doesn't want to become popular anyway. On top of that, he's also a reincarnated soul, so he is used to the female bodies of the human world, and not the scary monsters that live here. His mom doesn't let him lose hope and motivates him to find all the cute girls of their world. Anyway, a lot of time has passed, so the duo decides to go back home. While hoping for her son to become a popular playboy, Orc's mom also mentions that today is a special occasion that occurs only once every 10 years. Orc and his mom return to their home, where the demon lord is waiting for them. He is a little strict while greeting Orc, but completely changes his face while hugging his wife, whose name is finally revealed to be Miley. Now, we learn that the special occasion is the tribe chief meeting, wherein the chiefs from the 8 allied tribes come together for a bonding session as part of their tradition. This also happens to be Orc's first time attending such an event, so he is visibly nervous. Miley is more excited about the delicious meal that has been prepared for tonight, but her son's attitude is still gloomy. Miley mentions that the chiefs are going to be bringing their cute daughters to the event, but even this is of no interest to our hero. This is because he does not agree with the tradition of the orcs, which states that they must bring home the women they have impregnated in order to prove themselves. As a matter of fact, it's only Orc's dad who still follows these rules till date. Our hero lets out a rant where he makes his feelings known, but Miley tries to calm him down. It's of no use, as he continues to insult the tradition of his species, but Miley reasons that the women are not being impregnated against their wills. As a matter of fact, she thinks it's disgusting to use force in such matters, and tells her son that he has a lot to learn, especially when it comes to romance. She starts to provide a lot more detail on the acts of love, But luckily, the guests arrive before Orc can feel more embarrassed. The chiefs look rather dangerous, but the demon lord welcomes them without any hesitation. Their daughters have also come with them, and our hero is shocked to see how cute they are. As a matter of fact, they look just like humans, which makes Orc question his secluded life. Whether it's the elf girl or the fire fox girl, our hero finds all of them attractive. And now, his attitude has completely changed. He wants these women to himself, no matter what it takes. Miley spots this change in behavior, so she tells her son that it would be great for him to get along with these babes. His mind starts to let his intrusive thoughts in, because all he can think about is sneaking off with these girls to party while the adults sit down and have their chat. Unfortunately, his dreams remain a fantasy as he finds himself alone and disappointed by the end of the night. It turns out that none of the girls had shown any interest in him, and they simply ignored him the entire night. As expected, this makes Orc extremely distressed, so Miley drops by to help him out. Our hero tells her what happened, but she doesn't look surprised. Orc believes that the girls hated him because he was an orc, but Miley corrects him by saying it was actually because he's weak. Our hero feels he was better off not knowing that such girls existed, but Miley cheers him up by saying their kind has a mysterious power. This power enables orcs to draw out the true form of a woman. This means that people like Orc will have a better chance at landing these beautiful girls if he just becomes stronger. Miley understands that her descriptive words might make her son think less of her, but that doesn't matter. Our hero finally realizes where he's been lacking and agrees with his mom. He then makes a promise to become stronger so that he can get any woman he wants. He is even thankful for being born as an orc, and Miley is pleased with his declaration. Orc asks his mom to train him so that he can become an ideal man for these girls. There's no way he's going to settle for orc girls now, and it makes Miley proud. We learn that she is called the hero of Azure Thunder as she claims to make Orc the strongest male ever. In a rather hilarious display, Orc screams with determination that he is going to impregnate all those cute girls when he finally becomes an adult. Now, we see Orc talking about how he decided to start training with Miley in order to fulfill his dream. She's a bit too excited though, as she plans to start the process tonight itself. Orc tells her it's midnight and he's already exhausted, so she gets a little disappointed. However, Miley quickly pulls out some medicine which will help Orc forget his pain and exhaustion. This alarms Orc, but he decides to give it a shot anyway. He wants to go straight to the sword, but Miley tells him that isn't a good idea. In order to become strong, he needs to build his physique first, so she takes him out for a run. The mother and son kick off the training process and run for a full 3 hours. To Orc's surprise, he doesn't feel tired at all, but his body starts to break down. He has pushed his body beyond its limits, but Miley doesn't seem too alarmed. Suddenly, Orc heals from his weariness and is shocked by what just happened. That's when Miley explains the process of Orc training. Basically, the idea is to keep breaking the body and letting it heal so that it can increase its tolerance to intense exercises. In Orc's case, they don't have the luxury of extra time, so Miley is going to keep infusing magic to accelerate the healing process. With her son ready to go again, she says that they are going to continue running for 3 days. It's a bit too much for Orc, but he learns that any weakling can become as strong as a soldier if they go through with this process. It's a tried and tested method which has been passed down through different generations of the Forland royal family. Miley calmly smiles as she says that she won't even let Orc get any sleep, and it makes our hero question whether his mother is actually a demon. The duo keeps up with their training, and Miley starts feeding Orc some kind of special dumpling. Basically, this is some kind of superfood that was made by a great sage, and it will help Orc maintain the water level of his body. The journey continues, and Orc starts feeling close to his limit again. But then something strange happens. Miley unleashes her killing intent and it manifests in the form of a giant monster. This scares our hero, but his mom reassures him that she was just showing off. She allows her son to rest for a second, and then she says she'll show off her killing intent once again. Our hero is also amazed by the fact that his mom has been running with him for the past 2 days, and calls her a monster. Orc finds this weird, but he can't argue with the results of his training. He feels much stronger now, and understands why Miley believed this to be the best way to make him stronger. Orc says that his mind won't make it, but Miley remains firm that the training will only succeed if he puts his will to the test. Then, she makes it even harder by saying they should double their pace for the final day. Our hero isn't too keen on doing this, but Miley tells him that he needs to make his spirit stronger if he also wants to become more powerful. After a strong talk on the importance of determination, Miley makes Orc visualize his goals. As expected, all he can think about are the cute girls that came for the gathering. He uses this as his motivation and continues with his training. It's a bit weird for a son to be motivated in such a way by his mother, but stranger things have happened. As a matter of fact, Orc becomes so excited about the future that he starts to shout lewd obscenities regularly in the middle of his run. Miley doesn't seem to have a problem with this, and she motivates him to scream these words even louder. It seems hilarious at first, but after a certain point, it looks like Orc has completely lost himself in his desire to lay with beautiful women. His antics catch the eyes of his bullies, who are amazed by his sheer will. They wonder if it was their bullying that pushed Orc over the edge, but none of that matters to our hero now. Finally, after the most tiresome 3 days he would have ever lived in his life, Orc completes his training and falls to the ground. Miley is very proud of him for getting through the torture and congratulates him for his efforts. Then, she looks down at him and says that he has reached the level required to withstand her intense training. Normally, this is something that would take 3 months, but Orc has been able to clear his round by completing these 3 days. Of course, her son needs to rest first, so Miley tells him to eat some food and get some sleep. However, she also tells Orc that he only has around an hour or so to refresh himself. That's way too short of a time for our hero to get back into action, and he makes his intentions clear. He doesn't know if he's going to be able to survive such a course, but Miley remains confident. She tells Orc that he should let his spirit flow through his body, because that way, half an hour of sleep will feel like 6 hours. They are on a deadline, so these kinds of sacrifices need to be made. Orc dozes off to sleep, and Miley sits by his side as he starts to feel his own soul. Suddenly, his dad shows up and comments on his progress to Miley. She is surprised that Orc was able to make it through the training, but then again, he has excellent genes, so it is somewhat expected of him. Orc is able to hear this chat, but is half asleep, so he doesn't know whether it's real or all a dream. However, we hear his dad talking about sealing his power away, because it might be too much for him to handle. Miley tries to keep him calm, but agrees to the fact that there is no telling when Orc's powers might run amok. It's quite ironic to see the Demon Lord being scared of a little child, but there is merit to his concerns. This is because Miley confirms to us that Orc has indeed inherited his father's strength, and it is only a matter of time before it all comes together. She is still hopeful of the fact that her son will be able to wield such glorious powers, but only time will tell if this will come true. What's more surprising is that the Demon Lord is able to speak fluently with Miley, despite being an Orc. He only changes his language when he's alone with Miley, because nobody else can then find out his secret. The couple starts to get a little romantic with each other while Orc is still sleeping next to them. He hopes that all of this is just a dream, because it's a lot of information for a child like him to process. Meanwhile, we see a carriage on its way to the Orc village. A man looks out of the window and spots the village, after which he tells the old man next to him that Miley is staying here. Orc finally wakes up, and then Miley pushes him for more training. He is just surprised to see so much energy from his mother, but she reminds him that she has completely mastered her spirit. This means that she can stay awake for as long as 10 days if she wanted to. Orc cannot believe what he's hearing, but then Miley reminds him that she had fought his dad for around 2 weeks on the battlefield. Our hero calls his mom a monster, and then the two of them step out for some more training. Orc wonders if he's going to be taught sword fighting today, but Miley says that he has to meet his teachers first. Our hero is a bit confused, because he was under the impression that Miley will be taking care of all his classes. She admits that she can teach him everything, but it will take too much time, and Orc needs to train much harder than a normal person to reach the level he wants. As a matter of fact, all the running he did for 3 days was nothing more than a simple check. There's no time to argue, as the carriage arrives with Orc's new teacher. His name is Helf Landorl, and he is shown to be a rather polite gentleman. He holds Miley's hands with gratitude and thanks her for everything that she has taught him. He vows to repay the favor by teaching Orc the exact same skills that he had picked up from her. Our hero takes a look at Landorl and quickly realizes that he has the most popular company in the kingdom. On top of that, he is also known as the Merchant God, which in itself explains his status. For such a rich man to be here at the request of Miley is definitely a big deal, so Orc wonders how much of an influence she has in the kingdom. Now, we meet the same man from earlier who had peeked into the town through his carriage window. He makes a rather dramatic appearance and comments on how his boss is actually a wife now. His name is revealed to be Roland, and he reveals Miley's nickname to be Slaughter Princess. He tries to act cool by striking a pose, and even pokes fun at Miley by saying Orc would faint if he were to hear the tales of their past. She doesn't take too kindly to this joke and calls Roland a crybaby, after which she requests him not to spill any secrets in front of her son. Fearing her punishment, Roland quickly changes his tone and vows to teach Orc the ways of martial arts, as he is a master in that field. Orc seems to recognize this man as well, and eventually remembers that he is the king of fighting, Roland Bell, who has won the martial arts championship title 3 years in a row. It's such a surprise for our hero, and he wonders what his mom is really into if she has such a powerful network. That's not the end of it though, as another man steps out of the carriage and shocks Orc with his coin. This is the same old man who was talking to Roland earlier, but it doesn't look like Orc recognizes him just yet, even though he appears fierce and stern. The old man smiles at Miley and asks her to come back to his castle. It is here that she calls him grandfather, and Orc loses all sense of reason. Miley maintains that she will remain in the Orc village, and it makes the old man upset. However, he's happy to see that his granddaughter is happy and well. The real shock is yet to come, as we learn that this man is Vorio Forland, who was the former king of this land. He is pleased to see Orc and promises to teach him the ways of politics, so that he can also learn to become a good king and ruler. Our hero is still trying to digest the fact that he is related to the former king, but Miley clears up the confusion by saying she was the former princess of Forland. Everyone here is either her friend or her relative, so Orc is even more confused as to why she would leave such a life and live in an Orc village. Oreo starts feeding him sweets in the middle of this, which just adds to the ludicrous situation. Despite the already impressive crowd, there is someone else who is missing, and his schedule is even busier than everyone else. Orc doesn't even want to imagine who such a person could be, and Roland adds to the suspense by saying he really wanted to meet this man too. Orc is clueless as usual, but then a mysterious presence arrives. It's the special person whom everyone was waiting for, so Orc prepares for yet another fearful presence. However, much to his dismay, this man is actually a slime. It's not a joke either, because everyone bows down to him, including Vorio and Miley. We also get to see how powerful he is, because Orc can sense a deadly presence from this slime. It feels as if there's enough power to destroy a whole country within this slime, so our hero starts to question his own existence. Luckily, it doesn't take long for the slime to transform into a man, and it is none other than the great sage, Marlin and Light. His name has been etched into the history books, because he is known to have boosted human civilization by about 300 years with his wisdom and power. Marlin also happens to be Miley's teacher, which is why she is so submissive and humble in front of him. It turns out that Marlin had given her one wish for him to grant, and she has used it now to train her son. Marlin is willing to help her, but he feels that it would be a waste to teach someone with no talent. He has to measure Orc first, so he raises his hand to assess his power level. After a brief pause, he declares that there is enough potential for Orc to be taught, but it isn't anything great. Miley defends her son by saying he's great at sword fighting and spirit, and this leads to a competition of sorts between them. Both Marlin and Miley talk about how powerful their family members are, with Orc looking dazed in the background. Marlin realizes there's no point of such talk right now, so he just insults Orc by calling him an embodiment of lust. Miley takes offense to this, because she is proud of her son and his lewd intentions. Orc, on the other hand, just wants this to end so that he can continue with his training. Now that everyone is together, Miley places her faith in them to make Orc the strongest man in the world. He is clearly overwhelmed because these are all S-tier teachers, but these are no ordinary people, who will try things by the book. Orc tells his mom that she's going way over the top to get this done, but she argues that he will need such an expert team to guide him through his training. To give Orc more context, Miley starts talking about how each of the skills being taught to him will help him get close to cute girls and impregnate them with his seed. It's a rather dramatic presentation, but our hero gets the message, and even shows determination. He really wants to get his hands on some women, so he doesn't care if the journey to his harem will be tough. He places himself in the hands of his teachers and hopes for the best. Of course, this makes everyone happy, especially Miley, so they get together and begin the training. However, our hero did not expect that the methods would involve the use of questionable substances, magic, and every possible form of cheating. As a matter of fact, even hell would look like heaven in comparison to the cruel sessions Orc gets subjected to. The point of the matter though, is that you should always respect your mom and look for cute girls. You can either be Iron Man or a weakling in this world. Now, we are given a look into the kinds of things Orc had to go through for his training. It all starts off with Miley giving him his schedule. Not only is it 4 years long, the list also has everything written down to each and every second of Orc's life. He cannot fathom what he has to go through. But there's more. Marlin has marked some training days under a time rift, which means that everything will be much slower there. Basically, 1 day in that time rift would be the same as 20 days in the outside world. With Orc only expecting the worst now, it's Roland who takes up the first class. He wants to train Orc's spirit, and it also turns out that today is a time rift day. Miley gives him some instructions, but what she's asking for is a bit too much for even someone like Roland. He says that the training she wants for Orc will take 5 years and not 20 days. However, Miley gives him free range to do whatever he wants to Orc in order to get the job done. She even reassures him that Orc won't die in the middle of this session because he is blessed with a gift. The two of them even joke and laugh about it, which makes Orc a little concerned. Marlon doesn't care for any of this, so he opens up the time rift and then Roland gets to work. He prefers to be called Sensei, so he conveys it to Orc and then takes him through the rift. Upon reaching this new realm, Orc finds an hourglass on top of him, and it turns out to be the device that will measure time over here. As Roland prepares himself, he remembers how he had joined forces with Miley to defeat an overpowered beast. But he was too strong for them and ended up as the winner. Orc doesn't know what he's talking about, but after a few more questions, he realizes that the monster Roland is talking about is none other than his own dad. This means that the Demon Lord is stronger than anyone else in the entire kingdom. Orc then asks Roland about food, but is told that he can last 20 days without it. It's time to get down to business, so Roland asks our hero what he thinks about the spirit. After giving a brief answer, Orc says that his mom believes he has a lot of it. Roland becomes curious, so he tries to sense it in his body. He places his hand on Orc, and our hero senses a surge of energy that pushes him away. He wants to know what just happened, but is told that it was just a little bit of spirit energy. Roland then goes on to declare that he is going to use a deadly move which is known for killing anyone who faces it. He actually refrains from using it, but for some reason, he feels it will all be okay with Orc over here. He tells our hero not to die on him, and then he proceeds to hit him with a spirit blast that rips right through his body. It's a rather intense scene that completely devastates our hero, but he manages to survive. Roland tells him to calm down because he only put in enough energy to make him feel close to death. Basically, this is to try and awaken Orc's true spirit energy, but it's not going to be as easy as it sounds. As a matter of fact, he may actually die if he doesn't fight back and awaken his spirit. Our hero even says that he feels like he might pass away, but Roland tells him to buck up. He reasons that he's going to learn in 20 days what any other man would need 5 years to master. The least that Orc can do is stake his life for this and do his mom proud. It is clear that Roland isn't going to help our hero, so he's on his own and needs to come up with a way to survive. He thinks long and hard, and eventually, it's the thought of cute girls that gives him the motivation to push. He is yet to nibble on ears and sniff beast girls' tails, so he refuses to die and awakens his true energy. Orc will not back away from his mission to conquer pretty girls, so he finally unleashes his spirit and uses it to heal the hole in his body. The power is so unique that it feels surreal, but our hero does manage to get back on his feet. Roland is amazed to see this, and congratulates Orc on his success. It turns out that he has learned something in 5 minutes, which otherwise needs 3 years. Of course, he might have healed his wounds, but not his fatigue, so Roland offers him a special potion made by Marlon. Orc can feel his spirit energy now, and his sensei explains that they are now going to spend the rest of these 20 days to learn how to gather this power and use it in battle. Our hero is ready to learn his next lesson, so he asks Roland how he can gather the power he is currently feeling inside him. However, he is told that he will need to figure that out for himself, and it's not because his sensei is being mean. It's just that such things are different for each person, so Orc will need to use trial and error to figure it out. Roland tells him to take it easy because he's lost a lot of blood, but he shouldn't become lazy, otherwise he's going to beat him up. Orc has no intention of doing that, so he starts to channel his inner powers and lets out a burst of energy. This amazes Roland because it's taken no time for Orc to be able to master so much about spirit energy. That's when he realizes that Miley wasn't just saying things about her son out of her motherly instincts. As a matter of fact, he's a little jealous of Orc for having so much potential. Time passes by, and our hero survives the entire session with Roland. He comes back to the real world where Miley is waiting for him, and he already looks much stronger than before. She is impressed to see how far along her son has come, and Roland asks Orc to show off his spirit energy for now. Our hero manages to give us a glimpse of his progress, but he still feels that he can do much better. Miley wonders if this is the result of Roland's genius training, but the king of martial arts admits that it was Orc who managed to make everything look so easy. That's good enough for Miley, so she decides to split up the schedule now. She wants to dedicate slots to physical and mental training, and is willing to give Orc 1.5 hours of beauty sleep to recover from his efforts. This obviously scares him beyond belief, but Miley is not joking at all. This is because she wants her son to violate women as soon as he can, but he is of the belief that he can do such acts simply by becoming stronger, and not by studying. It is at this point where Miley explains the importance of being a gentleman. After all, the end goal is not to get a woman pregnant, but also to make sure that she and her child are happy. This opens up Orc's eyes, and he realizes that he should not become a scumbag. He is willing to put in the effort to become a better man, and this encourages Miley as well. So, our hero has just made his training schedule a lot tighter than it already was. Now, we move on to the former King Vorio, who is teaching Orc about history and other such subjects. He takes our hero to a bookstore and tells him to memorize everything within 2 days. This is clearly a huge ask, but Vorio says that Orc is not worthy of further training if he cannot do something as basic as this. As expected, our hero begins to argue with his great-grandfather, but then Miley comes in and tells him that he has to complete this task. If he fails to do so, then she will give him a splay, which sounds pretty bad, even if he doesn't know what it is. Luckily for him, Marlin also enters the room and offers Orc a potion which will help him with his focus and learning. He also tells our hero that he can be fixed even if he dies during his studies. It's not something that comforts Orc, but he begins his task anyway. The learning aspect actually goes quite well for him, and he even takes an interest in certain subjects. However, it's the final exam that's got him worried, because he needs to act as a representative of the king and unite the people of a small country. This place is in a state of total chaos, and one wrong order can lead to thousands of lives being lost. The pressure is immense, but our hero isn't one to back away from a task at this point. He manages to get that done, but then he also has to deal with Landorl and his classes on economics. Apart from the many things he had to learn in this course, Orc also has to start a business with limited funds and make a ridiculous profit in the time span of 3 months. This final exam was equally as tough as the first, but Orc manages to pass with flying colors. The real danger, though, is Marlin, whose classes are simply on another level. They mainly revolve around magic, but the problem is that some of the spells may lead to death if executed wrongly. Orc basically feels like a lab rat because Marlin keeps telling him that he can bring him back to life even after he dies. Despite the difficulties in these classes, Orc manages to get through them as well. Then, there are sword fighting classes by Miley, which are of a completely different vibe. She plans to have her son come close to death 10,000 times without actually killing him. This is because it will enable him to enter that phase whenever he wants. The most troubling part is that Miley is smiling as she says such dreadful words, but that's just how she is as a person. This is not ideal for Orc, but he knows that he has to get through this if he is to become the strongest man on the planet. He knows that he is a much better man now, thanks to his teachers, so he goes ahead with the torture. Days and months pass by like this, and before he even knows it, 4 years have been completed now. Orc is a grown boy now, and he has gained the stamp of approval from all his teachers. He decides to set out for a journey and leave the Orc village so that he can become a true leader. With him is his dad, who also recognizes this new phase in his life. They exchange a glance, and then the Demon Lord tells his son to follow him, because the time has come for him to learn something new. Our hero is taken into a holy place, and he is shocked to see both his parents dressed in formal clothes. He doesn't understand what's going on over here, so he asks for some clarity. That's when Miley decides to finally reveal the secret she's been hiding from her son. Even the Demon Lord wishes to do the same, so he begins with his explanation. However, he has had enough of speaking in his monster language, so he finally starts talking like a normal person. It leads to a funny scene between father and son, because Orc has finally learned that his father does speak in this manner. After learning that his dream back then was actually real life, our hero gets another shock when his dad reveals that he was the Demon Lord in his past life and didn't want to get found out after he retired. That isn't all, because he proceeds to transform into his real body, which is that of a rather stunning man. This is too much for Orc to process at the same time, but he has to continue listening to his dad's secrets. He learns that his village is not an ordinary Orc village because there are all kinds of Orcs. On top of that, the way he was bred was a lot more effective than selective breeding. This is because he only inherited the superior traits of his parents as part of his genetic structure. Since his dad is an Eval Orc, they have the best genes, but our hero refuses to believe this. That's when his dad says that if all Orcs have to breed with other tribes because if they do it with an Orc, then there's a chance for their children to be born without the superior traits. Basically, the ancestors of Orc's dad made sure not to produce children who were stronger than them because they had already reached their peak. Most children would either pass away before becoming an adult, or lose control and go on a rampage. This is the same fear that Miley had for Orc, and it's the reason why the Eval Orcs chose preservation over the pursuit of power. Our hero still doesn't understand, because his father is way too strong to be a weaker Orc. He agrees and says that the plan was for him to marry an Orc from the same tribe. However, he fell in love with Miley and wanted her to have his child, so they ended up doing the nasty. They seem quite proud of that, and express their affection towards each other with a kiss. As expected, Orc doesn't take too kindly to this reason. He also doesn't get the logic of being born weak if his dad and mom ended up mating. That's when his dad explains that he is the strongest person in all of history, since he has the superior traits of his father and mother. As a matter of fact, Orc had gone on a rampage during his 5th birthday, and ended up creating a massive hole in a forest. It took an entire army of demon lords to calm him down, and even Marlin had to use his magic to seal his Evol Orc powers. Our hero has no memory of this incident, so it all feels like a blur for now. His parents finally get to the point and tell him that Marlin is going to give him his last lesson today. It's on how to undo the seal he had set all that time ago when he was a child. Orc is visibly stunned to hear this, and asks if it's a good idea to do that. His mom then says that all the training he had gone through was for this very day. He was made to push himself as much as he could so that his body would be able to control the massive power that is living within him. It is here where Orc realizes that all the training Miley had forced him to do was out of love and concern for her child. Even now, there is a very high chance that Orc will lose control and go on a rampage, but she is willing to take that risk. It's because she thinks that he will come back with the power of love. Orc doesn't believe in the same thing, and it leads to an awkward silence. Now that his parents have spoken their truth, it's time for Orc to take ownership of his powers. Despite what may happen, he says that he is happy to have inherited his dad's and his mom's powers, which leads Miley to a very emotional state. She begins to cry, and it makes Orc feel awkward, so he tries to calm her down. Now that everyone is back to normal, our hero realizes that his mom might be crazy, but she does love him a lot. However, this family moment gets interrupted when an odd force occupies the room. Orc doesn't get what's happening, and then he witnesses teleportation magic, which is an extremely high class of magic. He wonders who it could be, and to his surprise, it's a cute girl who is congratulating him. Everyone looks at her with confusion, and that's when she says that Orc has been chosen to receive the power of the Fairy King. He is also to receive a mark which will prove his inheritance, and it forms on the back of his palm almost instantly. With everything set, the fairy girl takes a closer look at Orc because she has to be his new guide. However, she realizes that he's an Orc and loses her mind. She thinks that the Fairy King has become stupid, because nobody in their right minds would give so much power to an Orc. Our hero doesn't care for her words, and finds her obnoxious for breaking into his house and talking nonsense. However, he quickly changes his tone when he takes a look at the fairy girl, and realizes that she has a nice body. He even comments on it in front of her, and then we see a hilarious interaction between them. Despite Orc's comments, Miley is quite happy that her son is showing an interest in women, even if they happen to be tiny fairies. After a bit of back and forth, Orc decides to get to the point, and asks the fairy what the mark on his hand means. The fairy girl takes a deep breath, and then she tells Orc that he has been chosen by the Fairy King to be a hero. At first, Orc acts completely befuddled, so the fairy girl tries to ease him into his new role. However, he quickly decides that being a hero is too much trouble, and it would just be better if he returned this power. The fairy acts calm at first, but then she starts pulling her hair, because only an Orc can be capable of saying something so silly. A normal human would have taken this chance with a smile, but that isn't the case with our hero. Even though he is a reincarnation, Orc gets to the point and says that he's not interested in the fairy power, and doesn't even care about the fairy girl because of her size. He can't get her pregnant, so there's no point in even trying. It makes the fairy girl angry, and she makes fun of Orc again by calling him a shady animal. He doesn't take too kindly to this insult and tells her that his friends are actually herbivores, even though they used to bully him. It actually makes him call back to his recent chats with them. It turns out that the bullies have grown into nice men, and they have become good friends with Orc. We see a flashback where they're asking him what he wants to do, and he says that he's going to look for women. This is when we learn that the only reason they were bullying Orc was because of how pretty his mom is. They were actually jealous of Orc, but did not have the heart to tell him about it. They also asked our hero to find women for them, and it's at this point where we come back to the present. Orc realizes that his friends are just as shady as he is, so there's no point in trying to argue with the fairy girl. Anyway, he asks once again if he can return the Fairy King's power, but the fairy girl says that it won't be possible, because he's been chosen forever. At the same time, it's not like he has some duty to fight monsters whenever needed. He can just use these powers whenever he wants, and at some point, he will end up defeating those who annoy the Fairy King. Orc still doesn't get it, so the fairy girl explains that he can choose to fight the enemies of the fairy king if he wishes to. It's not a compulsion, and then Miley reveals that she was the previous chosen one. She would fight for the fairy king out of her own free will, and Orc has the same freedom. The fairy girl takes a closer look at our hero's powers and is shocked beyond belief. This is because he already has the power of a hero, and now he has double the abilities thanks to the fairy king. It was Miley who planned the whole thing in the first place, and she treats it so casually that the fairy girl can't believe what she's hearing. She scolds Miley for being reckless, but that doesn't affect her as she continues to smile. Then, Orc feels a strange power lurking within him, and it feels similar to what he had felt when the mark first formed on his hands. He wants to see if he can unleash this power, so he gives it a shot. He looks deep within his spirit and locates the Fairy King's powers. He then puts his other hand on it and gets the mark there as well. The fairy girl can't believe her eyes, but Miley is proud of her son for doing this. Our hero thinks about naming his marks, but the fairy girl warns him that only one mark is allowed per person. He cuts her off because he can feel some power surging within him, and he realizes the difference between his own power and the hero power. Suddenly, he sees a bunch of fairies gathering all around him and is awestruck by the sights in front of him. This is a rare feat, because usually, you'd have to go through an intense ritual to attract so many fairies. But here, the fairies have come to Orc to ask him to use their powers. Watching this scene makes the fairy girl lose hope, and she wishes doom upon the world. Miley asks her to calm down, but she just blames her for losing her mind after marrying an orc. Orc is just happy to not have any responsibility by virtue of being a hero, so he's good either way. He tells the fairy girl that she can leave, but this only ticks her off further. She goes away regardless, but tells Orc that she will keep checking in on him to report to her seniors. She also talks about needing juice before flying away, so Orc finds her fascinating. Miley is just happy that her son has been chosen to be a hero, and says that she's proud of him. As Orc looks at the marks on his hands, he wonders what a hero's power actually means. He then realizes that he could also feel his sealed powers for a bit. Now that he knows all his secrets, Orc goes to meet Marlin to take his final lesson. He finds him on top of a cliff and asks his sensei to do what is needed. He realizes that the chosen spot is far away from any village, and that's in order to avoid any damage in case he loses control. Marlin nods in approval to Orc's guess because the power that is lurking within him is far too great. He then offers our hero two options, wherein the first choice is to learn about the seal and live with his power. The other option is to seal it further and completely forget about it, since Marlin has come up with a new sealing potion. Despite this, our hero wishes to learn about the seal, so that he can embrace the tremendous power that is lurking within him. This makes Marlin question Orc's intentions, but he says that his power is a part of who he is, and he must honor his ancestors by learning to live with it. This is the answer that Marlin is looking for, so he agrees to teach Orc everything there is about the seal he has placed on him. Soon enough, our hero gets through the classes because he had spent 4 years preparing for this very day. He carefully listens to everything his sensei has to offer, and makes sure to learn how to seal his powers himself if things were to ever get out of control. Now that all the knowledge has been imparted, it's time to put Orc to the test. Marlin dares him to unleash his powers in an open area to check if Orc is capable of controlling it. We also learn that there are 3 stages to the sealing process. With each seal being opened, it will only get harder to close the entire thing, so Orc has to be very careful here. Tensions run high, but our hero remains confident in his abilities, so he kicks off the sequence by breaking his first seal. It's an intense moment, and a lot of energy is released in the process. We can even see the seal in the form of a lock being broken by Orc's powers. Suddenly, he transforms into a giant monster and loses control quite easily. He charges at his sensei without any sense of direction, so Marlin dodges him. It turns out that Orc is only at 20% of his powers, and it makes Marlin disgusted to see how his pupil has lost control so easily. In a fit of rage, he knocks down Orc and scolds him for being a useless student. This screaming touches Orc in his soft spot, and he thinks back to all the valuable memories he built with his family and his teachers over the past 4 years. This finally calms him down, and he remembers who he is, along with his goal. He can see his mom and his teachers in his head, and this eventually helps our hero turn back into his human form. He's glad to be back, as is Marlin, but it's time to seal his power again. It was way too much for him to handle, even though it was just 20% of his capacity. This makes Orc wonder what his true potential is, because all his training up until now was barely anything when compared to what he has inherited. Luckily, he can seal his powers by himself, but he doesn't want to push it either. After having a brief chat with Marlin, Orc gets a wand with a danger to mark the completion of his training. His sensei leaves the scene to go enjoy dinner with his daughters and turns into a slime so that he can fly away. He is quite proud of Orc for being his best disciple, and our hero is thankful to all his teachers for the efforts they had put into his training. He decides to bid them farewell one after the other in a funny and emotional sequence. Each of the teachers want Orc to continue in the field they had taught him, but our hero realizes that he has no place in just one particular field. The reason for this is because he has to leave his village and fulfill his dream of violating as many cute girls as he can. He crosses his parents who are asleep in bed and decides not to wake them up, so he leaves his house with a giant bag for supplies. However, as Orc begins his journey, he is given a grand farewell with fireworks lighting up the sky. Then, he sees his parents and his teachers holding a sign for him, which says impregnate them all. It's not exactly a humble cause, but our hero gets the message and promises them to do everything he can to fulfill his dream. Miley is the most pleased out of everyone in the group, because this is exactly what she has been training her son for all these years. On that note, he finally leaves the Orc village and begins his journey to find pretty women all over the world and get them pregnant. Will our hero be successful in his journey? Or will he just turn out to be a random creep for the women of the different tribes? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in my next video. Tap the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 2. See you in the next one.